The candle flickers. Its flame dances weakly against the stone walls of the tower. Outside, dawn is still half asleep, stretching pale light through the narrow window. And in that light, a woman kneels. Her name is Anne Boleyn, once the most powerful woman in England. Now, a prisoner waiting for death. The air in her cell is heavy with silence. Every sound, the drip of water, the echo of a guard's boots, the distant caw of a raven, feels sharper, colder. Anne's hands are clasped tightly. Her lips move, whispering words no one else can hear. They are prayers, but not for herself, not for mercy or for freedom. They are for him, for the man who once called her his everything, the man who would now take her life, King Henry VIII. It's strange how quickly love can turn into ruin. Just a few years ago, she had walked through palaces with sunlight in her hair, a crown glittering above her smile. The court had watched her with awe and envy. She had captured a king's heart, and in doing so had changed the very fabric of England. But power is a fragile gift, and love, when built on desire and defiance, burns hotter than any fire, and dies just as fast. Anne knows this now. She knows it as she kneels on the cold floor, her body trembling not from fear, but from the weight of memory. She remembers his hands, the way they once reached for her as though she were salvation. She remembers the letters, written in his own hand, calling her his heart and soul. She remembers the promises, you and I against the world. But the world always wins. A guard passes by her door. The iron key grinds in the lock, a reminder of what waits outside. Anne closes her eyes, steadying her breath. She has not slept. How could she? Every hour of the night she has been haunted by sounds, the faint crackle of torches, the slow footsteps of the watch, the whisper of her ladies crying in the next room. She does not weep. She will not give them that. But inside her heart, something aches, not from the thought of death, but from the thought of being forgotten. History is cruel. It remembers power, not love. It writes names in ink, but erases hearts in silence. Anne whispers again. Her voice is barely a breath. Forgive him, Lord. Forgive my king. She knows what they say about her, that she bewitched him, that she was proud, that she brought this upon herself. But no rumor can touch the truth that lives quietly inside her. She loved him. More than reason, more than safety, more than herself. As the morning light grows stronger, the room begins to change. The walls turn golden, almost soft. The shadows retreat into corners. And for a moment, she is not a prisoner. She is the queen again. She imagines herself walking through Whitehall, the hem of her gown brushing against polished floors. She hears the court musicians, the laughter, the distant toll of church bells. And in the crowd she sees him, Henry, watching her with that look of pride, that spark of danger. It had felt like destiny, two souls defying the world, rewriting history for love. But now she understands what destiny truly is, not a crown, not glory, but consequence. Every choice leads here, every whispered word, every risk, every act of defiance. This is where love meets its test. Outside her chamber, the tower yard is being prepared. Men carry planks and straw, hammering quietly. A French swordsman has arrived, chosen by Henry himself. They say he will make it quick. Anne hears the faint thud of wood against earth. Each sound feels like the heartbeat of fate. And still she prays. Her maid enters, eyes red from crying, carrying a small cup of wine and a piece of bread. Anne smiles softly. Her voice is calm, too calm. Do not weep for me, she says. I go to God. Her maid cannot answer. She turns away, shoulders shaking. Anne lifts the cup to her lips, takes a slow sip, and sets it down. Her fingers linger on the rim, delicate, steady. Everything about her is quiet strength. Time moves differently now. Each minute feels like a lifetime, each breath like a decision. Anne stands, smoothing her gown, a plain gray dress, chosen by her own hand. She does not wear jewels, no crown, no gold, only a small cross at her neck, catching the morning light. She walks to the window and looks out over the tower grounds. The sky is pale blue, washed clean by dawn. Beyond the river, the city stirs to life. People lighting fires, opening doors, beginning another day. Life goes on. It always does. And for a fleeting moment, Anne feels peace. She realizes that even in death, she is part of something larger, a story of faith, of love, of consequence. Perhaps God has written this ending long before she was born. Footsteps echo in the corridor again. The guard returns. His voice is low. "It's time, my lady." Anne nods. She does not speak. She does not look back. As she walks down the stone hallway, light spills across her face, the kind of light that feels almost holy. The air smells of mourning and metal and something final. At the steps to the scaffold, she pauses. She looks up to the sky, as if searching for something, or someone. And then she whispers, one last time, "God, have mercy on my king." The rest happens quietly, no cries, no struggle. Just the sound of a sword cutting through the air. Swift, merciful, final. The crowd gasps. A woman's body falls and the wind carries away her last prayer. But something of her remains, unseen, untouchable. They will write of her ambition, her pride, her fall. They will argue over her guilt and innocence. But no one will truly understand her heart. The heart of a woman who prayed for the man who destroyed her. In that single act of forgiveness, she became something more than queen, more than victim. She became human, fragile, brave, eternal. And as the candle burns out in her empty cell, its last glow flickers across the cold stone, like the echo of a love that refused to die. The sound of a harp drifts through the corridors of Whitehall Palace, soft, dreamlike. Somewhere in the garden, a young woman laughs, the kind of laugh that once made a king forget his crown. Her name is Anne Boleyn, but here she is not yet queen. She is only a woman the world cannot quite explain, too clever to be ignored, too bold to be safe. She moves through the court like fire through dry grass, leaving warmth for some and fear for others. In her eyes there's a light that dares the world to look away, and one man never does. King Henry VIII. When their eyes first meet, the world seems to stop. The candles flicker, the music fades, even time holds its breath. Henry is not a man easily refused. He is the ruler of England, God's chosen king. But Anne is different. She refuses his advances, not out of pride, but out of power. It's the first time anyone has said no to him, and that no changes everything. Henry becomes obsessed. Letters pour from his hand, filled with longing and promise. He calls her his sweetheart, his mistress, his only love. He vows to tear down anything that stands in their way, even the church itself. It begins as love, but already, in the shadows, ambition stirs. The court watches with restless eyes. Whispers spread like wildfire. A married king chasing a lady of his court? It's a scandal that could shake heaven itself. But Henry doesn't care. Love, he says, is worth any cost. Anne knows better. She plays her part carefully, never too distant, never too close. She becomes an idea as much as a woman, a symbol of something untamed, dangerous, irresistible. She makes him fight for her, and he does. Years pass. The old queen, Catherine of Aragon, is cast aside, her prayers unanswered, her crown taken. The church breaks, England divides, and still Henry calls it destiny. For Anne, at last, she is crowned Queen of England. A crown of gold rests upon the head that once bowed in the shadows. Trumpets echo across London, but beneath the music lies unease, the sound of hearts breaking, faith bending, and history shifting forever. Anne smiles that day, radiant and defiant, but in her eyes there's a flicker of something else. Fear. Because even as she stands at the peak of her power, she knows a throne built on love can fall with love. For a while, it feels like a dream. Henry dotes on her endlessly. The royal apartments are filled with music, laughter, and gifts. Anne's charm, her wit, her boldness, they make her the center of every room. She is untouchable, unstoppable. And yet cracks begin to show. She is clever, too clever for the world she lives in. Men call her proud. Women call her dangerous. And when she speaks her mind, the court listens not with respect, but with resentment. Her greatest strength, her fire, begins to burn her. Henry still loves her, but his love is restless. He wants more. He wants a son. Each failed pregnancy is a ghost that haunts their marriage. Every lost child becomes a silent accusation, a whisper in the king's ear. God does not bless this union. Anne feels the distance growing, not in miles, but in glances. She can see it in his eyes when he looks away too quickly, when he speaks to her too softly. The fire that once drew him is now the flame he fears. And she knows. Once Henry's heart begins to wander, it never returns. The court smells weakness. Jealous nobles whisper in dark corners. Old allies become enemies, smiles turn sharp, and every word Anne speaks is twisted into danger. Even her laughter becomes a weapon against her. Unseemly for a queen, they say. Her opinions, once admired, are now arrogant. Her charm, once enchanting, is witchcraft. The same world that crowned her now sharpens its knives. Henry, torn between love and pride, begins to change. He spends more time in prayer, less in her chambers. He avoids her eyes when she speaks of their future. And sometimes when he smiles at her, there's something hollow behind it. Love has become a memory he no longer wants to hold. One night, Anne stands alone in the great hall. The torches are dim, the room silent. She runs her fingers along the cold stone walls, walls that once echoed with laughter and music. Her crown feels heavier now. Outside, the river glows under the moonlight, calm and indifferent. Anne watches it, wondering how something can look so peaceful while hiding so much power beneath. That, she thinks, is what love is. Beautiful on the surface, dangerous underneath. She remembers the early days, the letters, the promises, the reckless hope, how she had believed that love could conquer everything. But love built on defiance cannot last. It bends under the weight of guilt, of pride, of fear, and she begins to see the truth. She was never just Henry's love. She was his rebellion, and rebellions always end in ruin. By morning, gossip has turned to prophecy. The same courtiers who once bowed at her feet now whisper behind her back. They speak of the king's new interest. Jane Seymour, quiet and gentle, everything Anne is not. Anne pretends not to notice, but she feels it. The shift in the air, the slow turning of fate's wheel. She has lived long enough in court to recognize when a heart and a crown are slipping away. Still she smiles. Still she walks tall, because even now she refuses to break. But deep inside she knows what's coming. It begins with silence, the kind that fills a room before the storm begins. Then the glances, the hesitation, the lies told with soft voices, until one day she will wake up and realize she is no longer queen, but prisoner. For now, though, she stands in the sunlight, pretending the warmth will last. Her daughter, the little Princess Elizabeth, sleeps peacefully in the next room, the only part of her story she will never regret. Anne looks at her child and smiles through quiet tears. Perhaps that is love's cruelest trick, to give us something worth losing. The harp plays again in the distance, the same tune that once drifted through Whitehall when it all began. The melody carries through the corridors like a memory, sweet, fragile, and fading. And as the music fades, so does the kingdom built on love and lies. The tower bells toll, slow, distant. Each note sinks into the fog like a heartbeat fading away. It is spring, yet the air feels heavy and cold. Inside the Tower of London, behind thick stone walls, a queen waits for her judgment. Her name, Anne Boleyn. Once loved beyond reason, now condemned without mercy. She sits near a small window, her hands folded in her lap. Outside, rain slides down the glass in thin silver lines. The sound is soft, almost peaceful. But behind that calm lies a storm of whispers, lies, and betrayal. It began quietly, a look, a rumor, a single doubt planted in the heart of a king. Henry VIII, The man who once tore his kingdom apart for Anne now listens to voices that poison his mind. They speak of treason, of infidelity, of a queen who laughs too freely, who speaks too boldly, who has too many friends in her chambers. And Henry believes them, because it is easier to blame her than to face the truth, that his love and his promise have withered into regret. Soon men are arrested, poets, courtiers, even Anne's own brother. They are accused of unthinkable sins. The charges are absurd, but the crown does not need truth. It needs silence. The queen's fate is sealed not by proof, but by fear. Anne's arrest comes at dawn. The guards enter her chamber quietly, as if afraid to wake the ghost she's already become. She stands tall, refusing to tremble. There is a strange peace in her voice when she says, "I am ready." As they lead her through the palace, faces turn away. Friends suddenly find something else to look at. Even the walls seem to retreat, ashamed. Anne walks with her head high, the hem of her gown brushing against the floor like a whisper of the past. Every step echoes, the sound of a crown falling, one heartbeat at a time. In the tower she is kept under guard. Days blur into nights. Her world shrinks to a cell, a prayer book, and her thoughts. The trial comes quickly, too quickly. A hall filled with nobles, their faces carved from stone. She stands before them, small and pale, but unbroken. They list the charges: adultery, witchcraft, betrayal of the king. Anne listens in silence. Her heart does not race. Her eyes do not lower. When they finish, she simply says, "I am innocent." The words hang in the air like a ghost no one dares to touch. But innocence does not matter here. The verdict has already been written, sealed and blessed by the king's will. After the trial, she returns to her cell. Her ladies weep, but Anne comforts them instead. She speaks softly, her voice calm, almost motherly. "Do not be afraid," she tells them. "We shall meet again in a better place." In those final days, something in her changes. The fear melts away, replaced by a kind of grace, quiet, unshakable. She no longer prays for rescue, but for forgiveness. Not for herself, but for Henry. The same man who had destroyed her now lives inside her prayers. It is the most human act of all, to love what has broken you. Outside, the court celebrates. Already, whispers of another woman fill the halls, Jane Seymour. Henry smiles again, as if the last years were a dream he's finally awakened from. But somewhere, deep inside, he must feel it. The shadow of what he's done. The sound of Anne's name still clings to him, like smoke that will not fade. In the tower yard, workers build a scaffold. They lay straw on the ground to catch the blood, to soften the sound of the fall. A swordsman from France arrives, chosen for his precision, his mercy. Anne hears of it and thanks the king. She thanks him. It is the moment her humanity surpasses his. In that single act of forgiveness, she becomes greater than her crown. The night before her execution, she cannot sleep. She kneels by her bed, whispering into the silence. Her hands tremble slightly, not from fear, but from exhaustion. "Lord," she prays, "forgive those who condemn me. Do not lay this sin to their charge." A candle burns beside her, its flame small and steady. Its light flickers across her face, revealing not a fallen queen, but a woman who has found peace in her suffering. She knows that by dawn, she will be free, not by the king's pardon, but by God's. The morning comes quiet. A thin mist rises from the Thames. The sound of footsteps echoes through the tower corridor as Anne is led outside. She wears a gray gown, simple and elegant. A red cloak falls over her shoulders, the color of courage and blood. The crowd watches in silence. Some cry, others cannot look at her. Anne mounts the steps of the scaffold slowly. She stands tall, her face calm, her hands clasped before her. The executioner bows. She returns the gesture with grace. Then, in a clear, steady voice, she speaks. "Good Christian people, I am come hither to die according to law. I do not say I am innocent, but I submit to the will of God. And I pray God save the king, for he is a good and gentle Lord. Her voice does not break. It flows over the crowd like a quiet hymn, gentle, forgiving, unafraid. She kneels. The sword is raised. The air stills. One stroke. Silence. For a moment, no one moves. The wind stirs, carrying away the last echo of her prayer. And in that silence, something changes. They killed her body, but they could not kill her truth. Her grace, her forgiveness, they become legend. Even her enemies will speak of her courage. Even history, in all its cruelty, will remember her as something rare. A woman betrayed by love, who died without hate. Henry's court moves on quickly. Within days he weds again. The same halls that once echoed with Anne's laughter now ring with celebration for another. But no matter how loudly the music plays, her absence hums beneath it all. For years to come, her story will whisper through the corridors of history, not as scandal, but as a warning. That love built on power will always destroy itself. That forgiveness, not vengeance, is the truest form of strength. And somewhere, beyond the reach of kings and crowns, Anne Boleyn's soul walks free, unchained, unbroken, at peace. Her truth outlives her. Her prayer becomes eternal. The queen who was betrayed becomes the woman who forgave. The tower courtyard stands empty now. The echo of the axe has faded. Only the wind remembers where she knelt. Anne Boleyn is gone, but not forgotten. In the days after her death, London moves like a wounded creature, silent, uneasy, pretending not to feel the tremor that has passed through its heart. The cobblestones that once felt her footsteps are damp with spring rain. Her ladies, once bright with laughter, move like ghosts through the corridors of the royal palaces. And somewhere within those same walls, Henry VIII sits alone. They say he spoke little of her, that he buried his sorrow beneath pride, that he rode out into the countryside with his new queen, Jane Seymour, as though to prove the past was finished. But history tells us something quieter, something harder to see, because every silence leaves an echo, and Anne's still lingers in his halls. She had been his miracle once, the woman for whom kingdoms were broken and faiths were remade. He had called her his destiny, his heart and sovereign, and yet, in the end, she became the mirror of his own cruelty. The crown that once shone upon her head now lies in a vault, untouched, but her words, her final prayer, move like a whisper through time. She prayed for him, for the man who had betrayed her, not with hatred, not with vengeance, but with something far more haunting. Forgiveness, forgiveness. It was her final act of defiance. In a court ruled by ambition, where love was a game of power, Anne's calm mercy was the one thing Henry could not control. It was a kind of strength that kings feared, a strength that did not need armies, or thrones, or titles. When she knelt before the blade, she did not curse his name. She spoke of mercy, of God's grace, of peace. And for that reason, she would never truly die. Henry's reign continued. He signed treaties, fought wars, married again. History would remember his triumphs and his fury. But in quiet moments, when the court's laughter faded and the music stopped, the silence would find him. They say he began to avoid the tower, that he could not bear the sound of tolling bells, that sometimes when he dreamed, he saw her, not as the queen he condemned, but as the woman who once smiled at him by candlelight when the world was still full of promise. It was not guilt that haunted him. It was memory, because deep within that memory lived the truth. He had destroyed the one person who had truly believed in him. Outside the palace, the story of Anne Boleyn began to change. At first, she was a warning, a lesson whispered among courtiers about pride and ambition. But as years passed, her story softened. It became something different. Mothers told their daughters of a queen who died brave and unbroken. Poets wrote of her eyes, her wit, her courage. And some began to see in her a kind of saint, not of the church, but of the human heart. A woman who loved too deeply and forgave too easily. Time has a way of reshaping tragedy. It polishes pain until it gleams like legend. Yet behind the legend of Anne Boleyn, there remains a simple truth, one that still speaks, softly, across 500 years. That love, even when broken, does not vanish. It lingers in the quiet corners of history, in prayers whispered by those who remember. And perhaps that is what Henry felt, in those final years when his own body failed him. Not punishment, not fear, but the weight of her grace. Imagine him near the end, old, sick, and heavy with regret. The palace around him colder than ever before. He reaches for a chalice, his hands trembling. The wine spills, staining his sleeve crimson, the same color as the gown she wore on the day she was crowned. He looks to the window and sees the English sky, gray, endless, and distant. Perhaps in that moment he hears her voice again. Not accusing, not angry, only calm. God forgive you. 3 words, the last echo of her heart. Today, tourists walk the path she once took, from her cell to the scaffold. They take photographs, they whisper. But if you listen closely, beneath the hum of the crowd and the echo of footsteps, there is something else. A stillness, a kind of peace. As if the stones themselves remember the moment when a queen chose mercy over hate. Because Anne Boleyn's story is not just about her death, it's about what survived it. A legacy born not of revenge, but of forgiveness. A love story that became a mirror for the soul of a nation. And so the echo remains. In the wind that moves through the Tower grounds. In the name that refuses to fade from history. Anne Boleyn, the queen who was betrayed, and yet somehow triumphed. Her silence became her voice, her death became her truth. And through that truth, she found the one kind of immortality that no crown could ever grant, the immortality of the human heart.